At 481 King Beach Drive, in a quiet neighborhood near Mount Vernon, Ohio, something went terribly wrong. Inside that house lived a mother and her 2 children. From the outside, everything looked normal. No signs of violence, no signs of danger. Then, on November 10, 2010, the mother never showed up for work. Calls went unanswered, messages were ignored, and that silence was the first warning. Because when the front door was finally opened, it became clear that whatever had happened inside that house, no one had survived it. The single mother, Tina Rose Herman, 32 years old, lived with her children, Sarah Maynard, 13, and Cole Maynard, 10. Sarah was an outgoing, cheerful girl with an incredible ease in making friends. Cole was more reserved, intelligent, and very creative. Tina and Larry, the children's parents, tried in every possible way to maintain their relationship, but they were unsuccessful. They divorced, and the children remained with their mother. Sometime later, Tina began dating a man named Greg, but the relationship did not last, and they eventually went their separate ways. To support the household, Tina worked at a diner. The drive to work took about 20 minutes, as the restaurant was located in Mount Vernon. She had worked there for several years and was considered one of the best employees. Her shift began at 4 p.m., but on November 10, 2010, she did not show up. Tina usually left for work after her children returned from school. Being late was not something she typically did, and when she failed to appear, the manager tried to contact her. Tina never answered the calls and did not reply to messages. The manager then contacted the police, asking them to go to Tina's house to check if everything was all right, what is known in the United States as a welfare check. This is not a common request and is usually made by family members when someone fails to make contact for a certain period of time. Officers received the manager's call and went to Tina's residence. A patrol car arrived at 481 King Beach Drive at approximately 7:30 p.m. The lights were off, and no one answered the door. Looking from the outside, the officers found no reason to force entry and left the scene. The following day, police received another call, this time about a second missing woman. Stephanie Sprang, a friend and neighbor of Tina's, was now also missing. She was 41 years old, had 3 children, and was an Ohio native. Stephanie had been helping Tina plan a movie night they intended to have together. She went to her friend's house shortly after noon and was never seen again. Cole and Sarah, Tina's children, also failed to appear at school the next day, and their names were added to the list of missing persons. When Tina again failed to show up for work, the manager decided to go to the house personally. Unlike the officers before her, she opened the door and immediately called the police. The house was completely covered in blood, with furniture out of place and objects scattered everywhere. It was strange that the first officers had not noticed this through the windows, but with the door now open, police entered the residence. Blood trails indicated that bodies had been dragged through the house in different directions. Despite the large amount of blood present, no bodies were found inside or outside the home. The bathroom was one of the most heavily stained areas, especially the bathtub, suggesting that the victims had been dismembered, eliminating any hope of rescuing the family alive. The 4 people missing, 2 women and 2 children. Large bloodstains near the front door suggested that at least one person had been attacked while entering or leaving the house. In the kitchen, in front of the counter, several grocery bags were left on the floor, still full. This suggested that the residents had been attacked shortly after arriving home, without time to put the items away. The grocery receipt showed the purchase had been made close to 12 p.m. These details allowed investigators to outline a possible sequence of events. Tina likely entered the house with the groceries around noon and was attacked before she could put them away. Her neighbor then came to help her, and the same thing happened to her. Later, the same fate appears to have awaited the children when they returned from school. This time window indicated that the perpetrator remained inside the residence even after attacking the first victim. This did not resemble the behavior of a burglar who would typically act quickly, but rather someone who had a specific target. Based on the reconstructed sequence of events, the last victims were the children, and if one of them had been the primary target, the story would become even more disturbing. The possibility of a kidnapping was both terrible news and a source of hope. At least one of them might still be alive. While forensic teams continued to analyze the crime scene, neighbors and family members spoke with police. The garage door appeared damaged, suggesting a possible point of entry. Another detail, missed by the first patrol unit that visited the house the previous day, was the presence of blood inside the garage. Tina's vehicles was also missing, likely used by the perpetrator to flee the scene. It appeared that the killer had taken the bodies with him. The family had a dog which was found dead on the property, possibly killed by the perpetrator to reduce resistance and noise inside the house. The final clue discovered by investigators was a Walmart shopping bag. Inside it, they found packaging for plastic tarps. The bag was separate from the grocery purchases, suggesting it had been brought there by the perpetrator. He had carefully removed the receipt, but what he did not realize was that there are other ways to trace a purchase. Investigators identified the store where the item had been sold and requested the security camera footage. While those recordings were being reviewed, police questioned the first standard suspect, someone close to the victims. This was Greg, Tina's ex-boyfriend. The relationship had recently ended around the time the family disappeared. Greg was interrogated but showed no signs of resentment or hostility toward Tina. He stated that he was at work that day and his employer confirmed his alibi. Greg was ruled out as a suspect and released. On Thursday, 2 days later, Tina's car was found abandoned about 11 kilometers from her home. No bodies were inside the vehicle, and compared to the condition of the house, the car was clean. There were no nearby houses in the area where the vehicle was found, and transporting 4 bodies would not have been easy. This raised the possibility that a second vehicle had been used, and that more than one person might have been involved. It was becoming clear that the crime involved planning. That suspicion was confirmed when investigators received the store report. The plastic tarps had been purchased the night before the attack. Surveillance footage showed a man entering and leaving the store, purchasing several items, including the tarps later found at the crime scene. His vehicle also appeared on camera. Unfortunately, the camera did not capture the license plate, but it did provide the vehicle's make, model, and color. Police compiled the list of all vehicles matching that description registered in the area, retrieved driver's license photos, and compared them to the footage. One individual stood out. Matthew Hoffman, 30 years old, was identified as a person of interest. His physical characteristics matched the man seen in the surveillance footage, and the vehicle was a match. A background check revealed that Hoffman had previously been arrested in Colorado in 2001. He had been sentenced to 6 years in prison for burglary and arson. That was not his only theft-related offense. Hoffman worked in repair and construction. The nature of his job gave him access to multiple residences. He would study a location, plan the burglary, and return when he knew no one would be home. At the age of 20, when he was arrested in Colorado, Hoffman set a fire to a house after committing a burglary in an attempt to destroy evidence. He fled using a stolen vehicle. The fire spread and damaged neighboring homes, causing an estimated $2 million in losses. After serving 6 years in prison, he was released and moved to Ohio, settling at 49 Columbus Road. Hoffman worked as a tree trimmer. Neighbors described him as extremely strange, quiet, and socially withdrawn. In 2010, he ended a relationship and was fired from his job after frequent absences. Based on his criminal history, police obtained a warrant and went to Matthew Hoffman's house on November 15, 2010. Due to the seriousness of the accusations, the warrant was largely procedural. Hoffman was not given the chance to open the door. The police forced entry. As the door was breached, a large number of red laser dots spread across the walls. During the apprehension of suspected homicide offenders, officers prepare for situations such as armed confrontation or escape attempts. However, what they found inside was something they had never seen before. The house was filled with massive, seemingly endless piles of leaves. The volume was so great that it was impossible to see the floor. Matthew Hoffman was sitting on the couch and appeared genuinely surprised by the invasion. One officer stood frozen, eyes wide and mouth open. Hoffman offered no resistance. The leader of the operation confirmed his identity and presented the warrant while the house was searched. Pile after pile of bags filled with leaves formed barriers throughout the residence, even inside the bathroom. The risk of traps or explosives was considered minimal, as this was their first time inside the suspect's home, but officers proceeded cautiously, clearing the upper floors. Writings and stickers were found on walls and doors, but no relevant messages or clear indications of the victim's whereabouts were identified. At that point, there was still no sign of them. That changed when police reached the basement. Walking over layers of leaves, officers descended the stairs. More bags and more leaves awaited them below. In a case that grew stranger with every step, the red laser dots were replaced by flashlights, and those lights were now pointed at Sarah Maynard, 13 years old. She appeared to be unharmed. She was lying on a bed of leaves, her wrists bound. Finding one of the victims alive was a major victory for the investigation. Despite the trauma, a life had been saved. Sarah appeared physically stable and told officers there was no one else in the house. Her family, she said, was dead. She underwent an initial medical assessment and was transported safely to the hospital. Matthew Hoffman felt the handcuffs tighten around his wrists as he was taken to the police station. The scene was so unusual that forensic teams struggled to establish an initial plan of action. Their efforts were first focused on the basement, where the victim had been found. Everything inside the house seemed to be made of leaves, as if Hoffman were obsessed with them. Inside the refrigerator, investigators found only popsicles and dead squirrels. By that point, it was already clear that Sarah had been the primary target and that the other victims were no longer alive. At the hospital, Sarah stated that as soon as they arrived at Hoffman's house, she was taken to the basement and tied to a pipe. While her statement was being recorded, Hoffman was led into an interrogation room. The evidence spoke for itself. The motive was no longer a mystery. What investigators needed now were details, and most importantly, they needed to find the bodies.
Hey, Matt. I'm Roger Brown. I'm a detective here at the sheriff's office. Okay, you want to take your hat and stuff off? Coat? All right with you? If I take them cuffs off and put them in the front, is that going to be a problem? Okay. All right, let's do that then.
All right, Matt, go ahead and stand up here for me. All right, just have to turn around here and just face the wall for me.
You kind of understand what's going on here, Matt? That's it. We can explain all this to you if you want to talk to me, okay? I think you know what we want to talk about. But we need to find some people. Matt, can you hear me?
By this point, police already knew that he was responsible. While extracting details and obtaining a confession were important, the primary objective was clear: to find the bodies. Unfortunately, Sarah was unable to help with that part. During an interrogation, there are two critical scenarios that investigators must prevent: silence, and hysteria. The second occurs when, overwhelmed by pressure, a suspect loses emotional control and breaks down, effectively shutting down communication. The first scenario, silence, is what happened in this case. The detective needed to get Hoffman to talk, even though legally he was not required to do so. Silence obstructs communication just as effectively as hysteria, making police work significantly more difficult. There are several interrogation techniques designed to prevent a suspect from reaching either extreme. Appearing approachable while maintaining a position of authority is not an easy balance to strike, and it does not always work.
The only reason that I don't know where Tina, Stephanie, and Cody are is because we had to spend a lot of time at the scene. Okay? We will know. We will find them. And if it's going to come to it that it's not with your help, then so be it. But I'm going to be the first guy to tell the jury that. I guarantee you that I sat in an interview room with this guy, and all he wanted to do is close his eyes and blink them until I walk out of the room, and then he opens his eyes and gets his drink of water. Now, am I a prudent person? What kind of person do I think that is? Well, one of two things. Either you're getting your composure together, you're thinking things out, thinking what to tell us, or you don't give a shit about anybody.
Presenting a confession as the best possible outcome is a strategy frequently used by police. Allowing a suspect to explain themselves and tell their sad story creates the illusion that people will somehow forget the crimes that were committed. It can feel like a positive way to relieve pressure, especially for someone as psychologically complex as Matthew. Unfortunately, this approach did not work on him. Another common tactic is exhaustion. By questioning and provoking the suspect for hours, investigators attempt to push the individual into a mental state where they believe the only way to stop the endless loop is by talking. Once a suspect begins to respond, the chances of returning to complete silence drop significantly. Offering food and water also plays an important role, helping to establish a form of connection or even dependence between the interrogator and the suspect. Matthew Hoffman was kept in that room for approximately 12 hours. During that entire period, he did not say a single word, which is genuinely remarkable. His only form of communication was through a gesture.
You know, other people, there's family members out there of other people, and all they want is closure. That's all they want. They've been up for days like you and I have, you know? Heart hurts. I don't understand sign language, man. Is that your heart? You're saying heart? Broken. Your heart's broken? Because of what happened? No? Someone broke your heart?
Matthew did not have difficulty communicating verbally. He simply chose not to. He remained silent for the remainder of the interrogation until investigators presented an offer. The death penalty would be removed from consideration if he revealed the location of the bodies of Tina, Cole, and Stephanie. Mentally exhausted, Matthew finally broke his silence, but only to make a counteroffer. He asked the officers to shoot him on the spot, claiming it could be staged as an attempted escape. The proposal was ignored, and Matthew returned to silence for the next 2 days. After prolonged pressure, he eventually began to respond. With his composure broken, police obtained a confession. Matthew claimed that the crime had begun as a burglary that went too far. He said he had entered the house to steal and was surprised by Tina's arrival. She was attacked as soon as she came through the door, exactly as investigators had suspected. The family's dog had already been killed. Stephanie Sprang arrived next and was attacked as well. Both women were killed as a result of severe head trauma. Matthew remained hidden inside the house until the children returned from school. They were then attacked, and Sarah attempted to flee to her bedroom but was overpowered. Tina, Cole, and Stephanie were dragged to the bathroom, dismembered, and placed into one of the family's vehicles. The car was later abandoned on the road when Matthew switched vehicles. The existence of a second car waiting nearby and the prior purchase of tarps were details he could never fully explain within his version of a spontaneous burglary. Sarah was kept restrained in the basement. During the investigation, it became clear that Matthew was affected by a paraphilia known as dendrophilia, an abnormal sexual fixation involving trees or plant matter. This condition helped explain not only his previous occupation and the extreme presence of leaves in his home, but also the location where the victims were ultimately found. Matthew guided police approximately 15 minutes north of Mount Vernon, Ohio. Handcuffed, he led them to a specific tree, nearly 18 meters tall and hollow inside. Within it, the dismembered remains of Tina Herman, Cole Maynard, and Stephanie Sprang were discovered, divided into plastic bags. An opening had been deliberately cut into the tree to allow the bodies to be placed inside. Surrounded by silence and grief, officers carefully removed the remains, attempting to preserve dignity and respect for the victims. The process took time. Matthew watched as each bag was removed, each one representing the weight of the life sentences accumulating before him. Only after the final bag was recovered was the tree cut down. The families were notified, and Matthew was transported back to the police station. He was charged with 10 counts, including aggravated murder, kidnapping, and abuse of a corpse. He did not plead insanity and, through his attorney, pleaded guilty to all charges. He issued an apology to the victims' families and claimed remorse, continuing to insist that the crimes were not premeditated, but the result of a failed burglary. Matthew Hoffman was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was transferred to the Oakwood Correctional Facility in Ohio, where he experienced significant difficulties, stemming not only from the severity of his crimes, but also from his psychological condition. He displayed panic attacks, hostile behavior, and resistance to authority. In March 2011, he broke a window inside the unit and had to be restrained by correctional officers. After this incident, he was placed in isolation for several days. Since then, he has been classified as a Level 3 inmate, a designation reserved for individuals considered a high risk to themselves and others, requiring constant monitoring. Sarah Maynard is alive and, as well as can be expected, has continued her life. She has given a small number of interviews and appears to be in recovery from the trauma. She was later taken in by extended family members who supported her healing process. Today, at 44 years old, Matthew Hoffman remains incarcerated in Ohio, where he is expected to spend the rest of his life.